Hi everyone. Welcome to The Wolfer. I am Carmen Tanner Slaughter, and tonight we have, as you probably heard, one of my longtime friends, Karen White. We're discussing how old we are not.
We are not.
Our children keep getting older, but we are still the same age.
Yes.
So, just a little
I'm the
bit
same
about
age as my oldest daughter now. I mean,
exactly.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I know. How does that work? It's like reverse time. And Karen is having wine tonight. I am not. I plan to have champagne, but I've been in the bed all day with a migraine. So I'm having tea, which is my ode to the novel.
Yeah, okay.
But I was really wanting to have champagne as my ode to the novel.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of champagne in this novel. But let me introduce you to those who are watching who may not know you, which I don't know how anybody wouldn't know you by now. But Karen is the New York Times bestselling author of 28. Are we on 29 now?
I think this is the 29th. Yeah.
Yes, we're on 29 books. And I mean, she has over 2 million books in print in 15 different languages. Her love of books began in third grade when she got her library card and the librarian placed a copy of The Secret of the Old Clock in her hands. And even though she loved books, Karen was not 100% sure she wanted to be a writer. So she went to college and pursued a career in business. 10 years later, she wrote her first book, In the Shadow of the Moon. That was in 2000.
Yes, ma'am. Well, it was published in 2000. Yeah.
It was in 2000, and that book was a double finalist for Romance Writers of America's Rita Award. And so now here we are tonight to discuss this beautiful, beautiful book, The Last Night in London. And it is Karen's most personal novel to date. And she will tell us why in a little bit, but it is definitely probably one of my top. I mean, I've read every book you've ever written, but it's definitely in the top 10. Probably top 5. I would have to go back through my huge stack of Karen White books, but it's definitely.
Remember, there's the one 10. Where your name is in it.
Oh, so don't think that I don't have it right here. So everybody, if you have not read The Sound of Glass, please do. And on page 348, you might see a familiar person. I don't know. So yes, but what I think is so funny. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here with us on The Wolfer. But what I think is so hilarious is that you weren't 100% sure you wanted to be a writer.
No, I still have doubts.
Because you are so prolific. Like I was doing the math the other day, and that's like a book plus per year for your entire writing career.
I know.
So even though you say you still have doubts, I'm like, at what point will you no longer have doubts?
Well, because it was something I just didn't. I've always loved, I mean, since the third grade, when I discovered Nancy Drew, I've had my nose stuck in a book, multiple books at a time ever since then. I mean, that's 9 years. So it's been 20 years now since I was 9 years old. And don't laugh. And, so I've always loved storytelling. I always love that beautiful adventure you start when you open a new book and you dive in. That is something I've just always loved. And I've always loved creating stories in my head. What I didn't love was the putting it down on paper. That was the hardest thing in the world for me. Because back in the day, in the old ages, when I, was in high school and even, college, that was the 80s, when we were just getting into the whole word processing thing. Oh, yeah. I still had to handwrite or use a typewriter to write my stories. And, I just remember getting C's in most of my creative writing classes in high school because, I would get an A for content and an F for handwriting. They used to grade me on handwriting, right? Because I'd be writing the story and the story would be coming to me and I would be trying to catch up to it and it would elude me. And I just found it so frustrating because even though my teacher said, Karen, you should outline so you know what comes next. But I don't want to know what comes next. That's how I still write my books. I don't know how these books are going to happen. I just start with my main character and like the essence of the story. And I just go. And that's how I used to be. And that's why I hated to write, because I would be creating while I was writing. And it wasn't until I learned how to type that I finally, my fingers and the words could keep up with what was going on in my head. But by then I told myself that writing was horrible. And it wasn't really, I mean, when I sold my first book, I thought that was a fluke. Second book, another fluke. Third book, etc. It wasn't until my 12th book, when I hit the New York Times list for the first time, I thought, maybe this isn't a fluke. Maybe this is what I was meant to do.
I think that perhaps it was. I don't
I'm a slow learner. Okay.
Anymore. I mean, because for those who haven't read Karen before, she writes standalone novels. She has the extremely popular Trash Street series, which is set in Charleston, which book 7 will be coming out later this year. And then she also writes collaborations with 2 other writers, Beatriz Williams and Lauren Willig. And so there's 3 of those, and I'm assuming there will be more of those coming.
Yes, currently working on that as well.
So again, you are like the textbook definition of prolific, and I don't even know, when do you sleep? Because I'm like, how do you do it?
Caffeine. I mean, I don't know how I'm getting any. I mean, right now, sitting on my desk, it's my turn to write my chapter for the next collaboration, which will come out next fall. No title yet, with Lauren and Beatriz, Lauren Willig and Beatriz Williams. I'm also working on my Trad Street spinoff series that will come out next year, also in the fall. And I'm working on copy edits that were given to me on the day this book came out. Wasn't that kind of my editor, for The Attic on Queen Street, which comes out in November. And I just got about 20 interview questions that need to be turned around by Thursday. Plus I have endless Zoom events.
Well, yes, because
that's why, which I appreciate and I love, but that's why wine and coffee. That's how I do it.
Well, yeah, because publishing and promoting during a pandemic has definitely changed.
And yes, my children are grown, but you know what I have now? My elderly parents. My mother has Alzheimer's. My dad has dementia. My 15-year-old dog has dementia. Yes. So, maybe, keeping all this stuff is keeping me on my toes and keeping my mind active, because
sure. I mean,
I don't know how I do it. I couldn't tell you. I need a camera to follow me around all day, because I don't know how I do it. I don't. It's hard.
At least you have your lovely getaway in Florida. We were just talking about it's a rainy, stormy night in Georgia, but Karen happens to be in Florida right now. So at least you have lovely scenery.
I do.
And a little bit of solitude. So, but again, I don't know how you do it. And I used to tease her. I'd like read a book and then I'd be like, when's the next one? But now with your books, I pace myself, because I remember one time we were talking and you said, it takes me X amount of months to write this book, and then
just read it slower.
You read it in a day. That's not right. So now I try my best to pace myself, even though it's really hard because you're such an amazing writer. But I take my time with it, because I know how much time you take writing them and making them lovely. So
and I do find that when you read, especially because my books, I do pay a lot of attention to the writing. It's not just the plot, but I want people to savor it. Or if you read it fast the first time, then go back and, read it slowly.
Well, you know what? I was thinking though, and I was talking to another friend who's a big reader, and I was like, there are certain authors that if they put me in a blind reading test where they just gave me a blank sheet of paper and said, guess who this author is, you would definitely be one that I would know, because your voice is so distinctive. It is. And the way you drop your readers in, like your first paragraphs, your first pages are always like, even a person who's never read you walking into the bookstore, if they just pick it up, and if they're not just taken by the cover, but if they read the first page, they're sucked in, because you have this uncanny ability to like strike all 5 senses, like in the first few sentences. So we're right there. We feel like we are right there with the character. We become attached immediately. It's very soothing. Your voice is very soothing, even when you're taking us in peaks and valleys with the mystery and the intrigue. It's still
like the prologue in this book, even my heart was. Before I wrote the prologue for this book, I went onto YouTube where they have actual footage of the Blitz. And, and it's like your heart is just doing this.
Yes.
And then I went and I wrote that scene. And I think that's why I put myself there. And I think that's why it's so real,
Yeah.
because I do like to immerse myself in my characters. So thank you.
So let's tell everybody, I will let you give just a little bit of a summary about The Last Night in London, how it came to be, your personal connection to it. And I know it took almost you worked on it, almost a decade from like your beginning thoughts
Well,
to
just,
now.
just in my head, because the main character, Maddie Warner, is from Falling Home and After the Rain. This isn't a sequel. It's not going to, you don't have to read any books ahead of time. But in Falling Home, Maddie Warner is 14 years old. She goes through the loss of her mother. And then in After the Rain, which is 4 years later, she's now an 18-year-old. And at the end of the book, she's about, she's a young woman about ready to jump into the rest of her life.
Right.
And I loved her character. I never planned to go back and revisit a character or a book, but I got so many emails from readers saying, what happened to Maddie Warner? What's the rest of her story? So I've been looking for that, because the town of Walton, Georgia is everybody's favorite small town. Mm-hmm. And I loved writing about that town, but I didn't want to put that, because her goal was to have a bigger life.
Right.
And I wanted her to have that. So I knew I didn't want to set another book with Maddie in Walton, Georgia. Although in this book, we do go back to it. And that, I think, were some of the most fun chapters I've ever written.
It was so much fun seeing those characters again. Yeah.
Right. And, but I knew that wasn't going to be her life, that this was, it was just going to be a stopping off point. So when I was 12 years old, my father's job with Exxon moved us to London. And we lived in this gorgeous Edwardian building. It was built in 1904 on Regent's Park. Beautiful. Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull had once lived in the penthouse apartment. And at the same time, I lived there. Joan Collins, member of Dynasty. She was Alexis Carrington. And her daughter, Tara Newley, lived there. And Tara went to the American School in London with me. And we would sometimes, because we leave at the same time, would walk together to the tube station. And she was in one of my creative writing classes, and she was brilliant. I don't know if she writes still, but she was brilliant. On the day that we moved in, our porter, who I guess is a doorman, when he took us into our flat, he explained that the reason why some of the windows in the flat were plain glass and others were lead glass was because of, during the Blitz, nearby bombs had shattered those windows and they were replaced with just plain glass. And, again, I had no intention of being a writer, but I was a storyteller at heart. And so, of course, many nights I would lie in my bed and try to imagine what it would have been like to have lived there during much of the history from 1904 until, the 80s when I lived there. But, World War II at that point was only 40 years past. That's not that long. Yeah. And there were still a lot of veterans alive, and a lot of survivors of the Blitz alive, of course. And I just remember lying in bed, just wondering about the lives of the people that lived there and who slept in that bedroom during nights, listening for the air raid sirens, what that must have been like. And so, of course, I've always been sort of imagining that story. And so, it was just a matter of time until this book came about. And it is set in both, because it's a time slip novel. So we have 1938, 39, 40, a little bit of 41. During the Blitz, and then we have modern day, and they are both time frames are set in Harley House, which is the lovely building I lived in. So I had a lot of fun with that. It was like revisiting my home, because I lived there for 7 years. So that was very special to me.
Well, I have to say that I'm a sucker for the golden age of Hollywood. Those movies are my favorite. Yay! And so reading this, I kept seeing like Margaret Sullivan and Robert Taylor, like all of these actors that I love from those movies, because this one, although all of your books are cinematic in a way, but this one was really, really, like, I could just see it floating by my face, like as I'm reading it, I see these scenes, and especially like the nightclub scenes and their glam
Yes.
looks. Oh my gosh.
They're beautiful clothes. And,
Yeah.
again, World War II, and especially World War II in London and the Blitz, there is so much footage, news footage, and everything else that I just had to go onto YouTube and search for it, newsreels from the time. And you could see the glamorous people. And there's books, you could see the pictures of these people dancing at the Dorchester or the Savoy, during air raids with their gorgeous, elegant gowns and
Right.
going to the nightclubs. And it was just really, really incredible how accessible the research was and how I just loved being able to insert myself into that time frame and into
Mhm.
the lives.
Well, and even like it was sort of amazing. Like we know that people continue to live during that time, but when you get into the research, I'm sure, and you find out how they just continue their daily lives as much as possible.
Mhm.
And oh yeah, we're just gonna go out dancing tonight. Oh, we're gonna go
Right,
out and have some champagne tonight. Now make sure you have your gas mask or be
right,
prepared
right,
for the siren. And it's
right.
sort of unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And that, so I read a lot about Winston Churchill. I developed
Mhm.
a serious crush on this man. He was brilliant. I mean,
Mhm.
absolutely brilliant. He knew he had to make tough decisions, and some of those decisions were unpopular, but he always kept the good of Great Britain as his primary focus. He
Yeah.
really saved the world. He was a brilliant man. And I read several books and part of his memoirs and his speeches. I mean,
Mhm.
I developed such a crush. He was, keep calm and carry on. He's the reason. I mean, Hitler thought, so for those of you who aren't familiar with the Blitz, it was 9 months of almost nightly bombings by the Germans. Nightly. I mean, I have a map. I wish I had the picture handy. I don't want to dig for it. But there's a map of central London, and it shows red dots of cumulative red dots of wherever a bomb fell during those 9 months. And it's just a chunk of red dots. You can't see the map at all. It's completely covered, including where Harley House is located. But the whole thing, keep calm and carry on. These people, 9 months, they would get up in the morning, they would bury their dead, they would pull out the survivors, they would sweep up the glass, they would business as usual. And that was because of Winston Churchill saying, we will not give up. We will never, 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 never give up. And it was that resilience. I mean, Hitler said he thought, Britain, after nightly bombings, a week of nightly bombings, the people would be like, enough, give in. Well, if Winston Churchill had given in, we would all be speaking German right now, because they called England Last Hope Island. All of Europe had fallen. All of the exiled European governments were in London, which is why it was such a hotbed of espionage during the war, which is why I put that in this book. And it truly was a remarkable time. And so when I hear people complaining about wearing a mask for 20 minutes going to the grocery store, I'm like,
Right.
people,
Like this is not a sacrifice. Like,
it's not, these people lived through hell. It was absolute hell. And my hat is off to them, because 9 months before Hitler finally gave up, thank God, and turned his attention to the Russians. And then, lucky for us, Pearl Harbor was bombed. And that's when, or not lucky for us, but lucky for the world, Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. And that's when the US entered the war. And Winston Churchill was, thank God the United States is in it. And that's what, it was truly incredible. And I'm not really a war researcher or whatever, but the personal stories is what got me, and how they survived just, blew me away.
Well, I still think that one of the greatest things that you do is, especially with like your dual timeline books, and you always have like some sort of fascinating historical tidbits that you include, but it's not dry. And I think it's really good for people who don't know a lot of history to read books like yours and other historical fiction writers, because it piques your interest enough to sort of learn a little bit more about that time period. Or I mean, we all kind of know like the basic stuff that you learn in school about the different wars, but when you read something like this, and it even like interested me a little bit more because I was aware that people continue to like carry on with their lives. But when you read about like, just every day they're getting up, they're going
Yeah,
in
oh,
there.
my neighbors were just killed, but I'm going
Yeah.
to go to work today. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh my
Or you walk
gosh,
up in the building that you work in, you walk up
it's
and it's a
not there.
rubble, you
It's not
know.
there. Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you do such a great job with that. And I was thinking, people, consider you like a Southern lit, grit lit, contemporary, but it's your books sort of transcend all the genres because even with like Trash Street, you have paranormal
right,
activity in all of
right.
those books. And I was thinking back over all the books you've written, there's always like a little hint of mystery or
Mhm.
like some deep secret or that has to be unraveled.
Right.
And I guess it goes back to reading Nancy Drew.
Oh, I know it is. Well, the Trad Street series has been
Yeah.
referred to as Nancy Drew for adults. I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess that's right.
Yeah, I mean, but it is. It's like, and I kind of have like issues when people try to box, especially women writers, into a particular thing. Because I'm
Right.
gonna make Miles read this because he's like a huge World War II. Like, don't even get me started. But I think he would probably enjoy this. Like,
I agree.
he
I
may
agree. And it's
glance
not a
over some
girly
of the
cover.
yeah.
He doesn't need to be embarrassed to read it. And
Some of the romance might make him turn his nose, but I think he would just really be interested in the espionage and the intrigue that's in
right,
there.
right.
But I was gonna say, I want to keep up with our time. Is your process different writing when you're working on a standalone as opposed to the series, as opposed to the collaborations, or is it pretty much the same thing? Or do you like switch hats with each?
I do have to switch hats. So for the collaborations, it's funny because Beatriz, Lauren, and I do not outline our single titles. We just kind of start writing. But obviously with a collaboration, you have to. So
Yeah.
we do meet at the beginning of each book and we create an outline. So that's what we call our cheat sheet. So
Mhm.
it does make it a little more fun to write. We make it very loose so that if one person is writing and we're like, this doesn't work, we need to change XYZ. And then we just adjust and it
Yeah.
works that way. But it's nice to have that little cheat sheet. And also when you have a question about something, you have two other brains to pass it by versus when you're working by
Mhm.
yourself and you're like, well, what if, and you just hear crickets and answers. So the collaboration, that's one thing because those are outlined. The Trad Street series, it's still writing. Each book is new, but I always had, I already have the setting,
Mhm.
down pat. I have most of the characters already, so I've been following their character arc for 7 books.
Mhm.
So there's some givens. You're not starting with a blank slate with the Trad Street series. Does it make it easier?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I would never say any of the writing is easy, but seriously, starting with I know Charleston now. I know, certain things that I don't have to look up,
Yeah.
Every book has, a different historical period that I get to look up because I enjoy that part. Starting a brand new book that's not related to anything, it's the equivalent of stabbing knitting needles into your eyeballs. I'm like, Dorothy
Yeah.
Parker said, I hate writing. I love having written. And
Mhm.
that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured as much. And speaking of the Trash Street series, Justine's is gone.
Believe me, my daughter sent me the link and I was just in Charleston last weekend.
Mhm.
Broke my heart.
I was in
Broke my heart.
tears. I was
It's
like,
dang
even though
pandemic.
if we had not been in the middle of a pandemic, I told my mom, I think I just need to drive over there and get one more piece of coconut cream pie before she
I
closes the
know, my
door.
God,
I mean,
Melanie's favorite. I mean,
it's just ridiculous. And I'm so angry about it. But I figured that you knew, but I thought that I should
no,
tell
it
you in
broke my
case you didn't.
heart.
Yeah.
It broke my heart. Yeah, yeah. Just
So that was a hard one for all of us. We got a couple more minutes. So speaking of the collaborations and having the cheat sheet, so Precious is also in one of the collaborations.
Right. So Precious
So,
Dubose, yeah, she is in
yeah.
All the Ways We Said Goodbye. And we see her there in 1964, where she alludes to a mysterious past from the war. And when we were writing that book, we didn't know what that past was. But I was
Okay.
like, Beatriz and Lauren, I need an historical element for the book I'm working on now. Can I take Precious and tell the story we don't know about, from
Yeah.
from the war? And they were like,
Well,
yeah,
and
that
I
sounds great.
wondered, I was like, now, did you know that
Oh
she was
no.
gonna be in The Last Night in London, or was it
Remember, we know nothing. I don't outline anything. I'm just like, I need a story frame, a historical story frame. And I knew it had to be the Blitz because of
yeah.
Harley House and the windows. So I needed World War II. And here's this wonderful character that's
Hmm.
just alluding to this unknown past. And as a matter of fact, when I figured out that I needed her, we switched the ending in All the Ways We Said Goodbye.
Okay.
Mhm.
Nice. It makes me want to go back and reread that one.
Right. And people who read all the Last Night in London and
Hmm.
enjoy it, you might enjoy reading All the Ways We Said Goodbye to kind of see Precious Dubose in,
Hmm.
in 1964. And, because in the Last Night in London, we see her, she's about to turn 100. And we also
Right.
see her as a young 20 something model in London during the Blitz.
Yeah.
So, and same with Falling Home and After the Rain. I mean, you might enjoy reading about the genesis of the two main characters in The Last Night in London.
Oh, I definitely think so. And it's like there's nothing that's gonna spoil any of the books.
No, because
So
they're not sequels.
no.
So yeah.
But yes, and of course, how I feel about Falling Home. We won't talk about how much I cried over that book. That is how
Yeah.
we met. Is she made me cry, and I had to go
But
find
you
it.
laugh too, right? That's my Steel
Yes.
Magnolias meets Sweet Home
Oh,
Alabama. So you
definitely.
laugh and cry.
Uh, it's just that's how you inscribe my book. It's like to the reader who cried. Even though I have the cover that we don't talk about, but
Yeah, no. The
so
new covers are so much better.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are. But that one is precious to me because it was the first. So what we got a couple more minutes. What is something that you would like to share with anyone who is an aspiring writer? Because we have a very active writers room within the Wolfer community. And I know that a lot of people who watch these author interviews are also aspiring writers. Some of them have already written books, but like, what is just one very solid piece of advice that has sustained you in your 20 plus year career?
Just don't listen to the naysayers. Just sit down and write the damn book. Don't talk about it. Just do it. I mean, like the Nike commercial, honestly, there are so many reasons why you can't write the book. I've got kids. I've got a busy career. I've got this going on in my life. If you want to write your book, write it. Don't listen to those little voices in your head that say, oh, I need to take more classes. I need to. No, when I wrote my first book, I just sat down and started writing. And that was my first book. That was my first published book. And read across all genres. Read books that inspire you. If you start a book and it's not inspiring you, put it aside. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means it's not the book for you.
Right.
Read your favorite authors, see how they do it. What makes it compelling. That to me is the best education for writing a book that I've ever received, is just reading really, really compelling books.
When do you have time to read?
You know what? That is my treat because I love to read and I hate to write. That is my treat. Every time I sit down to write, I allow myself 15 minutes of reading first.
Oh,
And then I
that's
get to
great.
write. Yeah. Which is nice. And also I've become a huge fan of audiobooks. Like I drive back and forth from Florida to Georgia. It's about 5.5, 6 hours. So I listen to audiobooks, and that's a wonderful way to, keep up with great books that you've been wanting to read and haven't had time to sit down and open the pages. So
yeah,
I still prefer a print book,
yeah,
but it's state troopers, and highway patrol frown on readers with big books, opened
you
up.
cannot go down the highway I still remember. I could just see you if there was a way that you could have a keyboard attached to your steering wheel.
Oh, honey, and believe me, and my response always to the highway patrol guys are like, I'm not texting. And they still like, no, you can't do that.
Like, so. Seriously, I could see you with, one of the self-driving, and you're sitting there, right? Because I can remember how you used to ride in the car line, and like you ride anywhere. So I could
have to.
I know.
That's how I've written so many, because I'm a slow writer, but people think I'm a fast writer because I've produced a lot. But no, it's because I write all the time. Yeah. I can't like sit down for 5 minutes without writing something. So.
And your brain's just always going. I'm sure, even though you probably don't know what you're going to do with it, you probably have an idea for like the book that's coming out 5 years from now or something.
I do. I mean, and because my best ideas come when I'm not thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, before we go, I did want to mention, because I try not to give away too much because we want people to read the book. So I just hope that everybody will pick up a copy. It's perfect for like the beach. It's perfect for it's just one of those books where you're going to have some time where you can just like snuggle up and just like read it and savor it. Don't read it too fast, but it's so compelling that it's hard to put down. But it is sort of a heavier read in the sense that you can't just flip the pages because there's so much going on. You don't want to skip ahead. Some people who speed read and they just scan and they flip and they scan.
I know. I can't.
You can't with this, but you can't with this because you don't want to miss one single thing, because if you do, you may not understand the ending of the book. I mean, it's true. So
those are the people that email me. I don't understand. I'm like, well, go back to chapter 6 and reread.
Mm-hmm. So they're in the epigraph. It's from a Wordsworth poem. So me, Miss English major, I had to go find the entire poem.
Yes.
But how was that just like a poem that you loved? I know it said several times the unremembered acts of kindness is mentioned at least 2 or 3 times beyond the epigraph. So is that just like a favorite poem of yours, or did you just find it while you were writing, or
it was really the inspiration for the story. I had read that poem and that line stuck with me, the unremembered acts of kindness and of love. That is really the main theme of this story. This is the story, the untold story of the thousands and thousands of heroes, everyday people who are really heroes from the war. They're out there. Their stories don't make it into the history books, but that doesn't mean they didn't happen. And I was trying to tell that story of those unremembered acts and the unremembered lives. Yeah. And that was going to be the title. I wanted it to be the unremembered acts of kindness and of love. And my publisher was like, well, that's a little long. And I'm like, oh, so you've never heard of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society?
Right, because that's a very long title.
I know. Thank you. But they said no. So we settled on The Last Night in London, but that's why I did put that poem in there. So thank you for noticing. And yes, and I'm glad at least I had the chance to put it in there, because I think it's important. And I think there's so many books out right now, like Erica Roebuck's book, The Invisible Woman, about Virginia Hall, who is this, oh, y'all need to read this. I'd never heard of this woman before. She literally should wear a Superwoman cape. The woman was a badass, pardon my French, but she was missing a leg from a horse riding accident, but she still went to France and was parachuting out of planes, helping the French resistance during the war with a prosthetic leg. And she was on Hitler's hit list because she was so successful at what she did. Unbelievable. Those are the stories we need to be telling, because nobody else is. And I'm just so thrilled at all the World War II fiction out right now, because they are telling the unremembered acts of kindness and of love.
Well, that's beautiful. And I just enjoyed this one so much, which I knew I would. I always do.
Thank you.
And Carmen. I'm very excited. I don't know. It's going to be sad to say goodbye to the Trash Street series, but I know that
there's a spinoff.
There's going to be, yes. I didn't know if we could talk about that
next year.
Okay, good. So that makes me feel a little bit better, but Melanie and Jack are very near and dear.
And you will see them again in this book. As a matter of
I know.
fact, Melanie is in the first 3 chapters. So
Okay, well, good. So again, thank you so much for doing this. It has just been a great pleasure. I love when I get to talk to my longtime people.
I know we've known each other forever, and I miss seeing you in person, but
I know
I'm fully vaccinated now, and I know in-person events are coming back. So
and I can't
November,
wait.
you watch out.
Yes. And November's my birthday month, so I appreciate you releasing that book just in time. But anyway, so everybody, thanks for watching. Go out, get yourselves a copy. It's available in like e-format as well, audio,
everything, audio,
everything. But like, you want to hold this book. You want to hold it in like,
and you want to buy it at an independent bookseller because
yes, you do.
That other place, they don't need your book money. If you need to buy a spatula, that's the place to go. But if you need a book, go to your wonderful community.
Yep.
Independent bookseller.
Yes, and if you don't know, you can look it up. You can go to Bookshop. You can go to indie booksellers or
indiebound.com.
Indiebound, that's it. And they'll show you where there's an independent bookseller in your neighborhood within so many miles.
And links are on my website as well. And my website is conveniently put on my background because that's one of my as an aside here, one of my skills during the pandemic is learning how to do virtual backgrounds.
Well, you did a lovely job. That's a very, very nice background. It works very well. So thank you all for watching. I will actually be back next Monday, same time, same place, with Erica Montgomery's book, A Summer to Remember. Which
I've read that.
Yes. And so I'm really excited to talk to her. It's a quintessential summer read, and it's got
yes. Put that in your beach bag right now. I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
So it's kind of a nice little transition from you to Erica. And we will talk to you soon. And again, thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your night.
Yes. Thank you, Carmen. Appreciate it.